Hi everyone! In this video we're taking a look at the exhibit Stitched in All Sizes, which is currently hanging in our main gallery. This exhibition is made up of quilts from the museum's collection, and what we're in right now is a smaller version of an exhibit that showed at the beginning of 2020. So this exhibit is adaptable and it changes as our collection grows, because it is looking at quilts from our collection and making connections between them. Specifically, it's about connections between some of our full-size quilts and some of our miniatures, hence the title, Stitched in All Sizes. I'm a guest curator for this exhibition, and this was a dream of mine to be able to put together a group of quilts that really they highlighted what fascinates me most about the miniatures in our collection and the way that they relate to or connect to some of the larger quilts that we have. So as someone who is thinking about our quilts all the time and gets to read the files and draw these connections, it was really great for me to be able to share publicly some of the things that I see sort of behind the scenes that I think are so cool. So this was a really good opportunity to share some of the ways that I sort of connect the dots within quilts in our collection and share what I love with people. So there are essentially, there are pairs, one large quilt and one small quilt. And so each of these pairs has a connection. In some cases it's obvious. It might be that the same artist made both pieces. In some cases it might be that the style is the same or the block is literally the same but scaled down. Some of them are a little more roundabout, and some of them are just connections that I wanted to see together just because I liked them. So we're going to take a look at some of these, and I'll show you why I put those two quilts together. And as the collection grows, I think that we'll be able to make new pairs and pull this exhibit out for different reruns in the future. The first pair of quilts that we're looking at were both created by Ann Sobel, and they're both titled A Midwinter Night's Dream. This one here is almost 100 inches square, and this one is 17.5. So what you see here is basically a scaled down replica of this larger quilt. And aside from the fact that it's just crazy to see them together like this, you can really get into the idea of how she translated a large design into a small design. So, for example, in this case, the scalloped border becomes embroidered French knots and leaves. And what's fascinating to me is that this print here with the greens and browns actually was used again in the miniature quilt, but because of the scale of the print, it translates very well. And then some of the larger applique flowers here become embroidery as well. And she's even kept that hand quilting grid pattern present in both, but again dropped it down to a smaller scale. So for me, I think this would have been quite a challenge to keep everything at a similar placement, the colors, and just the overall composition perfectly scaled down into her miniature. In this pairing, the full-size quilt was made by Virginia Siciliano. It's called Samarkand. And the miniature here is by George Siciliano, and this is titled Illusions. So they are a married couple, husband and wife, and they've been married for over 55 years. They are the first married couple to both have quilts in the museum's collection. And Virginia, she focuses on hand quilting. George is known for his very, very intricate miniatures based on log cabin patterns. So it's great to see their quilts together and to think about what it must be like for them as a quilting husband and wife team sharing a home together. And you can see that they've really, I'm sure that they encourage each other, but they've maintained their own distinct styles. This pairing is a new addition to this exhibition. Sunshine here by Amy Pabst was our first acquisition of 2021, so it's one of the newer quilts to the museum's collection. And this quilt is These Log Cabin by Doris McManus. It's not technically a miniature because it's not a scaled down version of a block or a larger quilt, but it is one of our smaller quilts. It's part of the Doris McManus Footy collection, so named because they're all about 12 inches square, and we have about 77 of those in our collection. She challenged herself to make a different quilt each week, which allowed her to practice new styles and techniques and challenge herself in new ways. So what was really interesting to me about putting these two together is that you have a larger quilt with the log cabin pattern and very, very small intricate piecing, what she actually calls micro piecing. And then here you have a smaller quilt with a larger scale version of that log cabin. So I thought this was kind of interesting to sort of flip it backwards and say, okay, if you have a large quilt but a small log cabin with a small quilt but a larger log cabin, I just thought it was interesting to put those two together and kind of play with, you know, ideas of what constitutes a miniature or what constitutes miniature piecing. And they look great together. This pair of quilts is another that are both made by the same artist. This is Shirley P Kelly. The larger quilt here is Remembering Kelly, and the small one is Cigar in Front. And you can see that her quilts are themed based on her love of horse racing. And a lot of the applique in this quilt is very small and very detailed. But this quilt was the first miniature that she had made. And she said about making this, "I had worked with miniature pieces in conjunction with my usual gigantic quilts. Normally I use small components to help convey the basic theme. I decided that making a small quilt would be a fun, relaxing respite from my current large quilt. How long could it possibly take? I figured a few hours work for a couple weeks. Little did I know that this fun project would be a learning experience of solving countless problems. It was a great accomplishment to complete this quilt, but believe me, it was pure joy to get back to my usual large quilts." This pairing is included because these two are our largest and our smallest quilts in the collection. Azimuth by Gail Garber is 110 inches square, and Log Cabin Dark and Light by Sally Collins is just 3.75 inches square. So looking at some of these smaller quilts next to their larger companions in this exhibit, you might kind of be a little wowed by the larger ones just because they're so present and they're so there in front of you. But I really would urge everyone to take a look at the smaller ones. Look at them as in depth as you would any of the larger ones. It's not that they're easier to make. Sometimes they take less time, but the skills needed to complete some of these miniatures are just as sophisticated as the skills needed to complete the larger ones. And in some cases, the artists do work on them for a great length of time. So looking at these tiny pieces and learning how to manipulate that fabric into place to get exactly what you want, and in some cases, figuring out how to scale down a large pattern to such a small proportion size can be incredibly difficult. So this exhibit is a great opportunity to look at some of the different ways that the artists approach quilt making and the ways that they're passionate about what they create. And we don't normally hang a quilt that is 3 3/4 inches next to one that is 110 inches. So this is a great opportunity to look at the collection in a new way and draw comparisons between maybe what some artists do on one end of the scale to the other, or what different artists do working in different styles. And then again, looking at some of the ways that these are put together based on just an exploration of themes or colors or styles or relationships between artists. So again, as the collection grows and we have new ways to link up some companions together, I'm really interested to see how we can continue to compare and contrast a lot of the quilts that we have.